Hello everyone, and welcome back to the final video of the U-81 build. Now I've had these around since December last year, and I just haven't had the time to edit anything. I've been so busy at work, but now I finally get to it. So, as you can see on the box art here, we are missing a couple of bits. And I'm using actual thread here to put some of the railings and some of the steel wires that are not part of the model. And just make it complete. So I do have the last paint job done. This is the second paint job over, and now it's just down to these kind of details. And I'm using a standard like sewing thread for this. It's black, and I'm gonna give it some gray paint. But first, I do need to try and attach it to these, well, rather extremely small little points here. And see, I think it just makes it more complete. That's why I like adding these sort of things. I know that some people are getting really fancy and using plastic threads, but I figure these are steel wires, and a twisted sewing yarn is actually reasonably close to that. So I'm just using a toothpick to get some glue onto that, and then I'm going to try and actually stick that thread onto there. Which, as you can see, is on the fiddly side of things. And once you've got it on there, it's just a matter of letting it dry and then attaching it to the respective other points. And I'm going to just go with the railings here on the superstructure, just behind the AA gun. I'm using some standard plier, standard tweezers to just pull it taut and give it some glue, and just to attach it there. And then I'm doing the same thing for the other wire. There we go. The two wires in the rear are attached. I think there's still one that needs to go in the front. And I have used it for the railings on the side, the wires that are connecting. You can see it. You can kind of see it here. We've got these two black threads here acting as the wires connecting these railings on the side. And there we go. This is what it looks like after I've just used the same gray paint that I've used for the hull, and given the whole thing a bit of a paint. And I'm reasonably happy with that. Next time I would probably see if I can find a wire that's actually already having the right color, because painting these, it does add a nice little effect of unevenness and like a bit of a foreshadowing of the weathering I'm about to do. But yeah, this is what we have with the final paint on, and with the wires attached. So the next step is going to be to add some weathering. Now, weathering generally is a technique to make it look a little more aged, because you don't want your submarine to look like it just comes fresh out of the factory. I want it to look like it's been out at sea for a bit. And one thing that you see very frequently is things like rust and just general discoloration from the water. But before we do that, one last look at the whole thing. And do remember, this is about the size of my hand. So this has all been reasonably fiddly to get that all together. And one more thing I need to do before actually getting into that is the decals. Now, there are not many here. It's the symbol on the side. It's a symbol on the front of the conning tower. And it's the flag. So these are water soluble decals. So all I have to do is cut them out very carefully, and then give them a good dunking until they come off the backing paper, and then stick them on and make them stick. Now, I have had huge problems with the flags in the past on Revell models, so I'm a bit wary of that. But we will start out with the somewhat easier ones, and I'm just going to go with let's get a toothpick, get this underwater. And then very carefully try to slide it off the paper onto its place. Now, you can move them around a little bit while they are still wet. It's kind of a balance between getting them not too wet and just making them actually flexible and getting them off. And it can be a little tricky, especially with decals this tiny. But yeah, you generally want to slide them, kind of try to slide them off and align them on the place where they need to be. And then once I have them where I want them, I'm using a frayed kitchen towel, because ripping it actually exposes some fibers that make it more absorbent. And I just use that to draw the water out. Just make sure that it's in the right place before you do that, because otherwise it'll attach pretty. You can put a bit of water on it and then try to get it loose again, but I generally try to get it in the right place first and then use the frayed kitchen towel to just try and get that off. Now we have the symbol from the U-81, which are going on the side. And again, once I have them on the, I have them sitting on the tower, I am using the kitchen towel to try and draw the water out very gently. And if you press down immediately, there's a good chance that you'll mess up the positioning. So I'm just very gently trying to draw the water out first and then get that on. Now lastly, the flag, and this is the one I was dreading because I did have problems with these in the past, because you actually need to wrap it around the flagpole and get the two decals to stick to each other. And sometimes I've just had huge problems, and I had to use like a household glue to get them stick together. Don't use a plastic cement because it'll just outright melt the decals. So don't do that. But with these, surprisingly, it actually went reasonably well. I was able to loop them around and get them to stick to each other. And then just use, again, my tweezers to extremely carefully attach them to each other. Don't pull on anything because you might just rip them. But there you go. I have the decals on. Now, if you're wondering why there's a white circle in the middle of the flag, this is because it's a German model, and in Germany displaying Nazi symbols is illegal outside of things like historical documentaries. So oftentimes you find, especially on revels, and I'm used to that from my childhood, that the Nazi symbols would, the swastika mostly, would just not be there. And instead you end up with a white circle. Now you can kind of very carefully paint it back in again if you feel so inclined, but honestly it's too tiny. So let's get to the weathering. And I'm using a MIG deep brown, which I really, really like. It's kind of like a thinned paint. I'm going to start filling in some of the contrast. I really want the contrast, especially of these holes, because they're looking a little bit flat right now. So you don't need to do much. Use very little and just fill them in. And I like using the deep brown because it does have a bit more of a rusty kind of color to it rather than a full-out black. But these panel line washes, they draw themselves into the lines very easily. So I'm just starting out to give these little holes a bit of contrast, and then just drawing some lines down of where I think the water would have washed down. Now you don't want to be regular, or you don't want to be have everything filled up or anything. You really just want to add a little bit of a little bit of dirt, grime, and general wear to these things. So you see that the brown actually makes that a really nice impression. So again, you can use it to just fill up these holes and give it more contrast and make it a lot more visible. I mean, look at them now compared to just a minute ago. And you can at the same time just use the same panel line wash to just draw it into lines. But what I'm generally going to do here is trying to highlight the rivets a little bit more, and just give it a little dab, and just go along the lines where you think the dirt or the rust or anything would be on a real model, right? On a real submarine. So given that the submarine goes in and out of the water, and the water is going to be washing down these lines most of the time, that's kind of what I'm going with here, and just generally highlighting lines like you see here on the bulges on the side. I'm highlighting the vertical lines, which are probably welding lines, and just to give it more depth, because it is a very small model, so it's not going to cast the same amount of shadow as something the real size would. So that's where you're helping out a little bit. plus lines tend to catch. And here we get to the deck, and then on the deck, you know, the deck is full of lines. So I'm just going to be really generous here with the panel line wash, and just generally spread some grime. You don't need to paint it very much. You just kind of need to get a bit on the brush and get it anywhere near a line, and it'll actually draw itself into the line, which is it's much easier than it sounds. And yeah, here we are. This is the finished U-81, the famous submarine that sunk a British aircraft carrier. And I must say I'm rather pleased with the model as it came out. So I hope you enjoyed this, and we will continue. I have some gear upgrades, and I've already got the next one lined up, but I do need to have some time first to actually get to it. But for now, I'm glad that I could finally get this video out and show you all, you know, what I've been doing. So thanks everybody, have a good one, and I'll see you next time. Bye.